Hey, it's Tom from Tom's Toons. Welcome to Coffee Corner. This is a series we're going to do of videos where we answer a whole bunch of questions that we get on comments, emails, all of those places. If you do have questions on this video or any of our other videos, please comment them down below the video. We'll try our best to get back to them. That way, you get the answer, and so does everyone else who's reading the comments. Good chance somebody has the same question. We're going to kick the series off with the topic of Tritoons. Big thing that's been happening in the last 5 years or so, and more people are converting their pontoons to Tritoons. I'll put the link in the description for the email address to the company that we source center pontoons from. They can make you a center pontoon custom to your size boat, diameter, length, etc. Let's start with Sportoon. This is the more cost-effective way to make your boat, a pontoon, into a Tritoon. It's taking a shorter center log and putting it in front of your motor mount or your transom pod. What this does, it gives you significantly more buoyancy, especially in the front. So if the front of your boat is always loaded down with people and dogs, then it's going to give you more lift there. It's going to help. Will it pitch your boat back a little bit at rest or empty? Sure, more than likely, because you have more buoyancy in the front. It's going to push your back pontoons down, or your outer pontoons down just a little bit in the back. But just like the name implies, sport, going fast. When you're going faster or have a higher horsepower motor, that's where this pontoon is going to shine in addition to that load capacity. So it's going to give you the ability to step up a little bit on plane and get more speed and performance if you have the right size motor. But let's look at our couple factors on a Sportoon. We're keeping that traditional transom pod. This is the same transom pod that you would have on a pontoon all the way back from the 60s, 70s up to today. If your transom pod is indeed 20 inches, we measure that from the top of the pod down to the bottom of the pod. If that's 20 inches, then your boat requires a long shaft motor, 20-inch shaft motor. If your transom is a little bit shorter, you're still going to need that same long shaft motor, but where you mount your motor is going to come into play. So on a 20-inch transom pod, you're going to have water most of the time flowing off the bottom of the pod to that ventilation plate. We're going to call it the ventilation plate today. It's often referred to as a cavitation plate, but in the outboard technicalities, ventilation plate is the name of that plate that rides right above your propeller. We need water to get underneath that to the propeller to push your boat and not
cavitate.
Bingo. On a 20-inch pod, water is going to flow off the bottom to your ventilation plate and reduce the chances of cavitation. You might still have to adjust your height up or down, just so you know. On a 16-inch, this is where, or a shorter transom, not necessarily just 16-inch, water is going to come, it's not necessarily going to flow off the bottom of your transom. That's where, if you see this sort of diagram on the internet, people post it in groups all the time. This diagram for motor height has nothing to do with a traditional pontoon transom. Nothing at all, unless it's 20 inches. A lot of them are shorter in height. If that's your case, on a Sportoon or pontoon application, we're going to take our water line on our outer pontoons. We're going to kind of just take a straight edge across and go down 4 inches, and that's where I want that ventilation plate to line up, is 4 inches below the water line. That way, when the boat gets on plane a little bit and it lifts in the stern, it's going to keep water flowing to your prop. On a Sportoon and a pontoon, there's going to be all sorts of guessing and checking. You might have to lower your motor, raise your motor. You might have to do it multiple times to get it just right, where you're not getting too much spray, you're not cavitating, and you're getting all sorts of that performance you want out of your pontoon. Keeping in mind, pontoons originally designed to carry a lot of people or loads or dogs, not necessarily to go fast. So we're finding ways to re-engineer them. Here's the one issue you need to take into account on a Sportoon. Your water flow is this red line coming off the bottom of the pontoon, and this is exaggerated here, but it can potentially throw that water, if you're going fast enough, big enough horsepower, it can throw the water beyond the ventilation plate or underneath, and you don't get enough water to the propeller. Usually this happens at higher speeds, and you over rev. The other issue with over revving could be turbulence to your propeller, or it could also just be too low of a pitch in propeller and you're turning too high of RPMs. We want the water to flow off the bottom of that center pontoon, that Sportoon, to the ventilation plate as clean and crisp as possible. That has to do with motor height adjustment, potentially. So take that into account. If you're having issues, it's probably the water's being thrown underneath. You may need to lower your motor slightly if possible. That is the Sportoon. We're going to move on to the traditional Tritoon. This is 3 pontoons when your center pontoon has a motor mount or transom mount on the middle pontoon. This is what the industry is leaning towards, is becoming more popular, and you're going to continue to see more and more of. Reason being, we get flotation the whole way through. It's my preferred way to add a center pontoon is do a full length with a transom, especially if we're looking to add horsepower, go fast, pull tubes, that sort of thing. On your engine height for a center pontoon with the transom integrated, I'm going to have water flow just like a traditional fishing boat. Water's going to flow off the bottom to that ventilation plate, to the propeller, and we're going to get performance out of it. On a center pontoon, the water flow is the same way. It's going to flow off the bottom of the boat to that ventilation plate and to the propeller, and you're not going to have as many chances of blowouts or over revving like you would with a Sportoon. Huge thing to take into account. If you're shopping for a center pontoon with an integrated transom, they really vary in engine shaft length or the height of the transom. So if this is 20 inches from the top of where the motor is going to mount to the bottom of the pontoon, if it's 20 inches, you need a long shaft motor, a 20-inch shaft motor. If it's 25 inches, you would need an extra long shaft motor. Take that into account. If you're buying a motor after the fact, just make sure you buy the right length shaft motor. But if you're converting your existing boat and motor to a Tritoon, you really got to make sure you get the right height. Otherwise, it's not going to run right. On a traditional Tritoon with a full-length center pontoon, I've had someone call and they were told by a pontoon distributor, they sell aftermarket pontoons, that if they did a bigger center pontoon than their outer pontoons, the boat was going to become less stable. That in fact is completely wrong. If our water line was up here, as the water flows up around that pontoon, the pontoon's going to sink exponentially faster because we're beyond that halfway point. However, if I add a big center pontoon and I get my water line to move down, now my boat becomes extremely stable because the water line is below that halfway point. So I have a lot more buoyancy, a lot more stability. The other big thing of why we do want a bigger center pontoon, ideally, I prefer 2 inches, maybe even 3 or 4 inch, bigger diameter or push down farther in the water, is performance and handling. So I want to make my Tritoon mimic the shape of a V hull. This is kind of like a speedboat or a fishing boat. That V shape is what allows a fishing boat or a speedboat to turn sharp, bank corners, have better performance and handling. So that's what I want to try to replicate in a Tritoon conversion, is a V shape, which allows me to then, if I'm turning left, I can roll this right side pontoon out of the water slightly. I can dig this inside pontoon in slightly, and that's going to give me the ability to bank turns to the best of an ability of a pontoon. A traditional pontoon boat is going to steer flat. We don't get much banking, if at all, but with a Tritoon, with the right configuration, we can bank our turns and get better performance. The last thing to note is lifting strakes. So these lifting strakes are designed to make a round object moving through the water is going to sit real low. Those lifting strakes are going to help to lift as we plane out, especially again in higher horsepower situations. So once we move into that 150 horsepower range and bigger, we're going to start to get the boat to really lift, and we can take advantage of those strakes. If you don't have strakes on your center pontoon or outer pontoons, you're still going to get all the benefits of steering and buoyancy. You may be missing out on some potential speed and efficiency. They can always be added down the road. Speed. Is making my boat a Tritoon going to make it go faster? Short answer, not necessarily. If you keep the same boat layout, the same motor, and you add a center pontoon, whether it's a Sportoon or a Tritoon full length, it's not necessarily going to make your boat go faster. I don't know the math behind this. There's some physics and whatnot, but the drag factor of the center pontoon is going to overcome that additional buoyancy. So the way I describe this is in an empty boat, if your boat goes 25 miles per hour with just you in it and it's a pontoon, when you add a center pontoon, it's probably still going to go 25 miles per hour. The big difference is, and I can speak from experience, we converted a small pontoon into a tritoon. When you add a few people and a whole bunch of dogs, or a lot of people, your speed is going to increase as a loaded boat. So where you used to only go 12 miles an hour, now you're going to go 16 miles an hour with a loaded boat. That's where the buoyancy overcomes the drag factor when you actually load up your boat heavy. It's the best way I can explain it. But it will not make your boat go faster just like that. If you're down the road or right now going to add a large horsepower motor, again 150 or bigger, then yes, you would see some speed increases because you're allowing more planing surface for that big displacement motor to move your boat faster. That is the Tritoon 101, the best I can explain it from my experience. Making your boat a Tritoon is going to make the ride smoother, better, more stable, without a doubt. Hopefully this helps. This is all from my experience, my knowledge on pontoons and tritoons. Take it for what it is. Comment your questions below. Subscribe so you get to see more topics like this. We're going to cover propeller pitch. We'll get more in depth with engine height. We've got a whole bunch of topics that we're going to cover that come up commonly. Electrical stuff. We're going to diagram it out and show you all those in detail. So subscribe, stay tuned for more of these coffee chat videos. And if you have questions that I haven't covered or video topics you want to see covered, send me an email, tomspontoons@gmail.com. Shoot me an email. I'll get back to you when I can or as soon as I can, I promise. Or again, comment down below so everyone can see your question and the answer provided. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.